So we got to get back to doing what's expected of us as free citizens in this democracy. That means being tolerant, being respectful, staying informed, and being engaged. I'm former Congressman Joe Walsh. Follow me here and join the millions of Americans who are renewing their social contract with each other. The social contract, it's on us. Oh my God, it was exactly a month ago. A month ago was the election, exactly a month ago. It's December 5th. I know it's December 5th because December 5th is my daughter's birthday, and I'm going to call her after this show. What happened? I'm still obsessed with this question. What happened a month ago? I've got my ideas, I've put out my thoughts, but I wanted to get the perspective of someone I respect the heck out of, and someone who, though she and I we're on the same, we were both Harris supporters. We both wanted her to win. I wanted to get her perspective because I know she's probably got a different perspective than I do. And this show, the podcast, Social Contract with Joe Walsh, is always about engaging with folks who have a different worldview than I do. What happened a month ago? I welcome Sophia Nelson to the Social Contract. There she is, looking way better than me, way more refreshed than me, but she always does. Sophia Nelson, if you're not aware of, is an award-winning author and journalist. She's I love writing about or talking about what you are, a diversity and wellness curator, a CNN opinion columnist and legal analyst. She's a columnist as well for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Forbes. And I want to ask her about this, the founder of a new nonprofit organization based in Virginia called Redefining Freedom Center, the Redefining Freedom Center, an organization dedicated to expanding freedoms for all Americans. I want to ask her about that. Sophia, I'm gonna tee you up. By the way, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Joe, thanks for having me. You are one of my favorite people, and I mean that. And
I just have a big mouth. You've got the brains.
You're brave, and we're going to need bravery. We're going to need patriots. And you've been that in a way that's pretty extraordinary when you consider your evolution from the Tea Party to where you are now. And we have a lot more in common and agree probably on 90% of our politics, actually.
Well, we do. And that's a good intro, because I'm going to tee this up with our question to you. But you're right. I come from the hardcore Tea Party base. I voted for Trump in 2016. I very publicly left him 6 years ago. Sophia was a never Trumper from the beginning. She's always been a good, solid conservative, been an independent for longer than I've been. She also, if you can't tell, she's a woman. She's Black. I'm white. Sophia, I've got my own thoughts as to what happened a month ago, why she lost, why he won. But I want to start with the broad question, and let's get into this conversation. From your perspective now, a month later, what in God's name happened on November 5th?
Well, I think, Joe, first, thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be here. But I think that you got to look at the data, right? Now that the election has been over for a few weeks, and we've been able to look at the crosstabs and look at the exit data, we saw something fascinating in race and demographics, gender, race, etc. Black women voted for Harris 92%. It was her most intense group of women. Now, to some degree, that's not surprising, right? You know, people tend to support their own, particularly in a historic election. But when you brought that down to white women, our white sisters, they were at 52%, meaning they only moved 1 percentage point from Hillary in 2016 to Harris in 2024.
Stop for a moment. Because I want to get to that 52% number. So 52% of white women voted for Harris, but go back to that 92% number, Sophia. 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris. Is that generally what happens? Was that number lower than it should be, or?
Democrats have to get, and I underscore have to get, 90% of the black vote or higher in a national election in order to really log that win. Now, she didn't win this time. The popular vote was again very, very close, with Trump winning it for the first time for Republicans in a long time. But Obama, for example, in 2008, Joe, got 96% of black women, having that intensity factor. I expected Harris to do better. She did
Why
well.
didn't she? Why didn't she
No,
get
I
Obama's
don't,
96?
I don't have an answer to that. It surprises me, but I suspect black women in my mother's age group, who are baby boomers over 75. And I know that my mother and I got into some knockdown dragouts about this. I mean, she loves Harris, is proud of her, but I had to really wrestle her into voting for her because my mom's generation of older church going black women have this mindset that it's kind of a men do this, and still I'd rather see a man as president. You'd be amazed how many women, white, black, Asian, Latina, etc., still buy into patriarchal norms as well.
So you still, that's fascinating, Sophia. So that your mom's generation of black women, that
Probably
sentiment,
women in general, but definitely
but
for black women.
that sentiment kind of like, the man needs to run the show. That's kind of still there.
It's very much still there, and we saw that when Rachel Bittkoffer, who's one of the best female pollsters, I had her on an event 10 days out. She said what pollsters aren't talking about in this election is the race and the gender factor. She's like, we're talking about the economy, we're talking about inflation. She's like, and all of that is relevant, but what Trump tapped into was men feeling emasculated by the culture writ large, particularly younger males, particularly younger white males, and of course black men as well, feeling that, well, the girls are running circles around us and this isn't a party that speaks to us, meaning the Democrats, right?
Yeah.
So when you take that and you look at the crosstabs, Jewish women 89% for Harris, Latina women 67%, something like that for Harris. But like I said, white women stayed in that constant, and she really needed to win more white women. And for a Democrat to win the presidency, you got to go back to 2020 and look at Biden's votes. Biden, Joe, got a higher percentage of white votes overall, akin to what Clinton did. Obama did pretty well, but Democrats have been losing the white vote for a pretty long time. And you saw that again in this election.
Was, and again, you have a great unique perspective here as a black woman, and maybe this, Sophia, is a stupid question. Did Kamala Harris's race or gender hurt her more?
Boy, that's a good question. I got to tell you, as a black woman, I get it both. The gender, you're a woman, you're of color. You never really know the answer to that question. But I would argue that I think you got to go back to Hillary at 2016. She's a white woman. And look at those numbers. They're not too far apart, which tells me that it's really the woman factor. If you look at America and juxtapose us against other first world nations, advanced countries, Europe, around the world, we are pretty much the only big gun left that hasn't put a woman in the top spot yet.
Why is that?
I think the election of Donald Trump, again, after everything we know, and you say this every day, I think you tweet this at least 10 times a day, that you're stunned that we did this again. Yeah. I'm not, because when you look at his cabinet picks, when you look at the patriarchy, which is a word I'm not nuts about, but it's the best one I've got at the moment, we are still that country. We are still very driven by gender norms, by traditional structures. We're still arguing over whether or not we're a Judeo-Christian nation or not. We're arguing over things that other countries, just first world countries, have moved beyond.
And Sophia, that's really interesting, and that's fascinating to me, because I'd also argue, and I think you'd agree, I still think we're the freest country. We're the world's oldest democracy, capitalism, free markets. It's amazing that we're still the one first world country that hasn't done it yet.
Right. And I think that, I'm looking at some of your comments. It looks like you've got a lot of Trump people that come on here and terrorize.
Hello, MAGA. Hello. Well, Sophia, what's great about this show is we air it live on all my
I like it.
platforms. Facebook is dominated by Trump supporters. But what is that uniquely about America that we haven't done it yet?
I just think that it is such a deeply rooted issue. And you also have to remember, Joe, we're only 50 years, your lifetime and my lifetime. We're only 50 years into the civil rights movement advances to women advancing. But here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about, and I will because I've lived it. What the Democrats missed, among many things in this election, was I saw those transgender commercials, and I remember telling some of the Harris folks, you better pay attention to this.
Yeah.
And my understanding is Bill Clinton said the same thing, and there were others who said, you better ring that bell. And I think that one of the backlash from MAGA and others that I agree with is that diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you ask your average person, do you think diversity is good? 99% of people are going to say, of course.
Yeah.
If ask people, did they agree with everyone being included and based on their talents and their merit and their brilliance, everyone's going to say yes. I think the challenge became for the left and for progressives. They began to, in their zeal to have LGBTQ plus persons be accepted, etc., they began to put it in these policies in our universities, lived it, in corporate America, and they began to mandate that everybody have to think the same way, agree with the same things. And if you don't, you must be removed. You are somehow not a good person. You are a racist or a sexist or a bigot or whatever they call you. And people silently got tired of that crap, and they were fuming.
They went too far.
Yes.
So even with Sophia, with the best of intentions, they went too far.
Listen, you know what happened to me on my college campus back a few years ago? I sent out a tweet. It was National Coming Out Day. I had no idea. And there was a comic book character. The Superman's son was bisexual. And I tweeted, well, what would a Christian parent tell their child if they come home with this comic book? A very civil, respectful, normal question. I'm looking for answers. What I got instead was protested, attacked, reviled, petitions to remove me.
Yeah.
Pretty much ruined my teaching career. This happens, and then we saw that escalate post October 7th after Israel was savaged and attacked on our college campuses, where you had these pro-Hamas. Are you serious? Pro-Hezbollah, pro-Palestine. No problem with people supporting human beings. We don't want anybody hurt. But we saw how out of control wokeness, not me using that word, others using that word, and DEI got in the minds, and the Democrats missed. They missed big how important this issue was and is to a vast majority of Americans who are, yes, overwhelmingly white, but not just white. Black people, brown people, a whole bunch of people.
Well, right, Sophia, because as you know, certainly the Latino community socially is more conservative on a number of these culture issues. The Black community is more conservative on a number of these cultural issues, correct?
Especially in church, absolutely. And that's how I grew up. And listen, my grandparents were Eisenhower Republicans. You go back to the history of the Republican Party when it was normal. It was a storied party. It helped with the ascendancy of the African American into the middle class. And then you have the civil rights movement where everything kind of flipped on its head. The parties changed personalities. And so, Joe, I think that the Democrats just took for granted certain things, and they thought that they could kind of, Harris didn't run on trans or LGBT. She didn't talk about that stuff
at all. Yeah.
She ran a very centrist kind of campaign, and yet the dots weren't connected. People just didn't trust them to get it done.
And you're also a strategist, Sophia. So that's an interesting question. Kamala Harris didn't talk about this at all, but yet every day in the battleground states, Trump had that commercial out there, the transgender commercial out there, and boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, day after day, they spent millions on it. And the Harris campaign never responded to it. And I get why they didn't want to respond to it. They didn't want to talk about it, but Should they have?
Absolutely. And again, looking at these comments, because I always look at comments, whether they are thoughtful and engaging or ridiculous.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at some of this, I go back when I talk to my Democrat friends and I say, you miss the intensity, the anger, the
Yeah.
vitriol, and the utter contempt that a large swath of Americans have for feeling like they've had something pushed on them, like their freedoms have been taken away. And the most important thing is the disinformation and the misinformation machine, Joe, that goes 24/7. If you pull the Nielsen ratings right now, the top 25 shows on television, Fox has 20 out of 25.
Yeah.
Fox is the undisputed leader in every category. CNN had one, Anderson Cooper, and MSNBC used to have a couple, but they've all fallen now. Morning Joe in a lot of trouble. I'm good friends with Joe and Mika. You know, it's the country has shifted.
And yet, Sophia, I will say this as a proud woke Tea Partier,
Yeah.
in that even when you look at like the transgender issue,
Mm-hmm.
Most Americans are actually closer to where Democrats are on this issue. I mean, when it comes, and you tell me if you disagree with me, when it comes to transgender Americans, the vast majority of the American people are loving and embracing. Be who you want to be, live your life as you want to live it. When it comes to women's sports and bathrooms and locker rooms, we got to find solutions that are fair and respect everybody's privacy. That's where most Americans are. And you have the right now basically saying transgenderism is a mental illness. It shouldn't exist. It's going to be erased. I wish Democrats would fight on these social culture war issues.
Well, I live here in Loudoun County, Virginia, which was ground zero for the transgender issue, which is how Glenn Youngkin got elected in this
Yeah.
otherwise pretty blue, purple at best state. And that issue is going to continue to be a big one. The Supreme Court, as you know, heard oral arguments yesterday on this gender affirming care. You could see the split, the ideological split with, you know, Justice Alito versus Sotomayor. They're always at odds on these things. But your point is well taken. The Democrats have decided not to engage, and that is to their peril. It's only going to get worse because the fact of the matter is Trump is a master, give the devil his due, at being very focused on the things that he knows drive human behavior. He's a brand guy. He did do Celebrity Apprentice. I don't think he's smart. I don't think he's anything good.
And he's dishonest. He lies.
Right. And so he will push, and he did. I mean, talking about eating cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Talking about the things that he did. Your kid's going to go to school a boy and come home a girl. He knows that's ridiculous, but it sells. It works. With these very people right here who are saying these things, it sells with these folks. They believe it.
Sophia, with Black voters, the migrant issue, again, another issue that you brought up that was a huge issue, and it's a real problem. And you're right, Trump lies about it to scare people, cats and dogs. Mm-hmm. But Democrats, to their peril, didn't engage on the issue. Mm-hmm. And I heard from Black folks in every battleground state I went into campaigning for her. They were pissed off about the migrant issue.
Well, listen, like I said, I listen to my mom and her friends. You know, I call them the old ladies club. They're cute. They kind of get their little church lady book club and things. But you listen to them again, different generation, different time. They were Reagan supporters. They believe in America. They believe in freedom. They believe in immigration. Yeah. But then they are 24/7 being told that all these atrocities are happening because of what's going on at the southern border. 400 women a day, for example, in this country are subject to domestic violence, abuse, or murder at the hands of a man they know and love, a husband, a boyfriend, whatever. We don't talk about that, but we'll talk about the 20 women that were murdered by migrants who came illegally or whatever, and that's horrible. But my point is, we're not dealing with the stuff, the pox on our own house. So
Yeah.
it's easier to scapegoat someone and say,
Yeah.
hey, these people are the cause of our problems, and black people aren't immune from that any more than brown people are or white people are. And so we didn't talk about it. And Harris, I think, focused on, she really thought the pro-democracy argument was going to sell. She thought that going after the Republican swing voters, which you were a part of Republicans for Harris and that coalition, I think that was a smart strategy, but now we know that wasn't what drove this election.
Was it a mistake? Because I was a big part of Republicans for Harris. Was it a mistake for Kamala to make that a focal point and to go to the middle and to try to get Nikki Haley Republicans and independents?
No, I think that David Plouffe and the guys she had, who were very smart pollsters, and again, the pollsters got this thing pretty wrong. I think that they were crunching numbers, and they're saying in a tight election, Joe, in a tight election,
Yeah.
we got to figure out what's the tipping point. So it made sense that they figured that there were these disaffected Nikki Haley voters and Republicans, or people who, Joe, 90 million of our fellow citizens didn't even show up to vote. They just didn't vote. That's a problem, right? So people are turned off to politics. And I think she thought having a hopeful, joyful, kind of more optimistic message was going to work. But that wasn't what this election was about. Again, look at these comments and understand where people are.
No, and Sophia, you make a great point. I mean, a lot of the comments you're seeing on Facebook, that's Trump's base. But that anger and that feeling goes well beyond Trump's base.
It does.
And we've been living like in this populist moment for a while. Trump's a demagogue and he takes advantage of it. But like Democrats haven't recognized this moment.
No,
and I appreciate it, Sophia.
Afraid. That's why Republicans don't take him on and deal with this, because your classic John Thune Republican or Joni Ernst, and we can talk about all them, Mitch McConnell, they're not going to buck that horse because they know the tide has turned to a populist movement. The Democrats didn't catch on to that.
So what do they do, Sophia? What if you're advising the Democrats, what do they do now?
I think that our two-party system is broken, irretrievably broken. And I think that we're going to have to decide, we the people, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just independents. We're going to have to decide that we want something better from our government. And until we demand that at the ballot box, we got to get these people out of office who are 75, 85. The baby boomers sit down. It's Gen Xers and millennials that should be running the country at this point. And, but we're not running for office either, because the baby boomers have such a footprint in the Democrat Party. Look at the leadership. Chuck Schumer, did you really reelect him to be Senate leader again? Really? He just got his ass kicked, and you put him back into the spot. Give it to Amy Klobuchar, give it to Cory Booker or somebody younger or whatever. And what happens is we keep playing this. Nancy Pelosi, why is she still around? I respect her, admire her, but you're 80-some years old. Go retire and play with your great-grandchildren. That's the problem. And I think that the Democrats, like the Republicans, are wedded to the bases of their parties, the far left and the far right. And that's why we're in this mess we're in, Joe. I don't know if it gets fixed.
Yet, Sophia, from your perspective, as an independent, I've felt this way before the election. You say the parties are wedded to the two bases. I think on the Republican side, the base has become the party. Like, I think it is now the MAGA party. That's now the Republican establishment. That makes sense?
Yeah, and term limits, I'm a big proponent. Jack Kemp was one of my mentors. I was blessed to work for some amazing Republican politicians back in the day who were, conservative but centrist, center-right, which is made them a very strong governing coalition.
Yeah.
And, term limits would be a good idea, but these guys aren't going to limit themselves because the power grab is there. I think that, Joe, the Democrats have got to decide if AOC and her young, progressive, if we deconstruct AOC, her politics make sense to me. She's a young Latina from New York, in the city. her politics in her district are very different than, Tim Walz when he was a congressman from Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to look at how you come to the middle. The middle's where both parties are going to have to be if they want to get things done, if they want any form of bipartisanship and to move the ball forward. I mean, Collins and Murkowski will be very powerful in this new Senate because they can swing votes kind of to Dems, Republicans, whatever. And I think there'll be some others that will get picked off as well. I think John Thune being elected a Senate Majority Leader tells me a lot about the establishment still having some type of power because Rick Scott.
Though, let me ask you a question, Sophia. If that vote had been a public vote, not a private vote,
would have been different.
Yeah. They're not ready to. Yeah.
They're afraid of Donald Trump for the reasons we've just discussed. And again, when you look at these comments, and I like them, even when they concern me, I want people to be able to say what they want to say. I think, Joe, that Democrats just didn't understand the cultural backlash that was happening around DEI, wokeness, trans, boys and girls sports. They laughed it off as some kind of wacky, right-wing whack job stuff, and it wasn't that at all.
There's a part of me that has believed, and I've said often, that this MAGA party is a shrinking political party because it's primarily made up of middle-aged and older white folk, and Trump appeals to them for a lot of reasons. But yet, this Republican Party maybe won't shrink if this appeal to Black and Latino men especially continues to grow. Do you see that happening?
Here's the problem. Women, there are more women than there are men. That's number one. That's always going to be the case. Two, the reality is that the Republican Party would not have won the White House without the Electoral College, period. Nebraska having 2 U.S. senators the same way California does is not what the founders intended. The original 13 colonies, it made sense that we would have something like the Electoral College so that little Delaware and little New Jersey and Rhode Island wouldn't be overwhelmed by Virginia and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if you look at the popular vote, it tells you the story. Trump won by 0.25 or 0.27.
Yeah, but Sophia, here's the deceptive thing about the popular vote. The data shows that a large number of Democrats in California and other blue states just didn't come out and vote.
Absolutely true.
So weirdly, the Electoral College really skews the popular vote because a lot of people in heavily blue states just don't vote.
Well, it goes back to what you and I were talking about before we went live, and I think this is a very important aspect when you talk about Black voters, for example. If I look at the vote here in Virginia when Glenn Youngkin ran in 2021, Youngkin benefited from 2 things. One, there was this huge backlash on the trans issue, the bathroom, a girl had been assaulted.
Yeah.
The Democrat apparatus tried to cover it up and do whatever. It was a hot mess. The second thing he benefited from was Black voters. Virginia has 23% of our population is Black. Most of the southern states are 23, 25, 30, 40, right? So the Black vote matters. Black people, their vote dropped by 6-7% from the 2020 presidential election, where Biden won by 10 points here, to the 2021 election. What am I saying? You're absolutely right that the Democrats' base is shrinking as well. Less and less of their people are participating.
Why?
Well, I go back to my parents' generation, the civil rights generation. The Democratic Party transformed the moment that John Kennedy and RFK called and got MLK out of that Birmingham jail cell.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Daddy King was a big Republican. He stands up, he introduces and endorses John F. Kennedy. The rest is history. The parties flipped identities. Lyndon Johnson was a master, as you know, at building that coalition of Southern voters and enfranchising Black folks with the vote and the Voting Rights Act. What am I saying? I'm making a point that there was something to rally the Democrats for a very long time, which was civil rights, voting rights, women's rights, etc. Now we've plateaued, Joe, which is what makes this current Republican Party so scary to me. Because if you look at what happened with Roe, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, doesn't matter. The reality is you have a daughter. When I was 20 years old, I had an ovarian cyst that came out of nowhere. I would have bled to death had I not gotten to the ER and had emergency surgery. But under this current climate, if I'm in Georgia or Texas or somewhere else and that same thing happens to me as a young college girl, I would probably bleed to death and die because they would think I was having an abortion spontaneously or something, and that wouldn't be true. So what I'm saying is that there's a rollback of the gains of women and racial minorities under the Trump MAGA because white voters feel like they're under attack, they're being discriminated against. This is the stuff we don't want to talk about, but that's where we are.
But yet, even with everything you just said, he garnered more of the black and the brown vote.
Well, he got more black male votes and he got more Latin male votes, Latino male votes.
That's
okay?
true. Male.
So he's male, not females. Females rejected. White women split. White women still voted more for Harris than they did for Trump, but only 52% to 48%. And a gender gap, Harris had a 30-point lead. Right. So, but when you got down to white female voters, had white women voted for Harris, just 55% would have been game over. Trump
hey, Sophia, was the whole thing like the Julie Roberts commercial, the whole notion of trying to push getting wives to not tell their husbands who they're voting for in the privacy of the booth? That didn't seem to pan out.
I think that didn't stick. I think that they overplayed their hand on reproductive rights. They should have focused instead on what I just said. You got a daughter, you got a niece, you got a granddaughter. You don't want her to have a cyst or a fibroid or something benign that she needs help and she can't get care. They needed to nuance that argument a little bit better. But I also think that, to your point, what I'm saying is, yes, the Republican Party is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly rural, overwhelmingly Midwest and South, right? Not the coast, not the East Coast, not New England, etc. And so when you look at the party, look at Trump's cabinet, look at what it looks like.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of talk about that. And I think that, the question becomes for the Democrats, they're very diverse. They have a lot of people they have to deal with in their coalition, right? They've got AOC, they got Bernie Sanders, and then they've got more conservative Democrats. So I think that, Joe, both parties stink and are broken, and it's bad.
I completely agree. And I think the first article I wrote calling for a third or fourth party was like 10 years ago. I agree. Does the Democratic Party take the black vote for granted?
Absolutely, they have. They've been able to. And the Republican Party, Jack Kemp, back in the day, was screaming off the rafters with Daddy Bush saying, we need to go after this. And I believe that George Herbert Walker Bush, who I worked for when I was in college, law school, one of them. And, I believe that he was a guy that could have turned the tide on that. And then I think W had some opportunities as well. But 9/11 happened and it kind of changed the whole footing of his presidency. So I think that Republicans have had opportunities to make gains. Mitt Romney, certainly in 2012, went to the NAACP, wasn't afraid to go and talk, and was warmly received because his dad was well liked by Black Voters Civil Rights Act. And so, I think that there were opportunities for the Republicans to engage the Black vote in a positive, meaningful way. I think that's going to come again, but it won't be the Republican Party, Joe. It's going to be there's going to be a third party movement, or several of them, I think.
Answer this question however you want to answer it. Are you more likely to ever become a Democrat or a Republican?
Neither. I don't. I think that, as I mentioned offline, I'm involved with the Forward Party. I think that there are sea legs there. They're doing the right things by building that infrastructure. We're gonna really work at it hard here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because Virginia is a purple state. We don't do party ID. We're unique.
Yeah.
Our governors are term limited to one term.
Which,
Virginia,
by the way, give me your take on that.
I
That's
think it's
just
awful. I think it's awful.
it's horrible. You're a lame duck the
Our
moment you're
governors
elected.
are presidential contenders. It means if you're governor of Virginia, you can't be taken seriously. You notice why we haven't had a president from Virginia since what time?
God, Sophia, that's
So,
horrible.
it is
What?
horrible, and it needs to be fixed, but things
Yeah.
don't change. Remember, everything was born here, 1607. It all starts here in the Commonwealth. So we pride ourselves on that. But back to your question, I think that I couldn't be a Democrat because there are too many policies like what we talked about.
Why not become a Democrat? Help push them to the middle.
Because they're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it. And Republicans are just way too out of order. Again, I'm looking at these comments and, MLK.
You're not where the base of the Republican Party is.
Yeah, MLK was against DEI. These are just ignorant, stupid comments.
Let's close with this, something hopeful that I want to learn about. You just launched an organization. You're launching an organization called the Redefining Freedom Center, a nonprofit organization. Tell me what it's all about.
Well, think about the word redefining. To redefine something is to change it or to amplify it or to shift it. And I think that we have to have a discussion as we head into our 250th birthday, 2026, which we will celebrate here in the Commonwealth and everywhere. We have to have a discussion about what freedom means, what it looks like, who has it, who's it for. At the founding of this country, Joe, freedom was only for a small group of Caucasian men who were wealthy landowners, merchants, etc. But the promise of America was always that we would perfect the Union and that we would go, and we have done that masterfully. It hasn't always been easy. We fought a civil war. But what I'm talking about is, particularly post this election, I want to have an America where we bridge divides, where I can sit down as a Black female former Republican, very center right in my politics, and be able to ask a question as a professor on my college campus without getting protested and run off and called names, because I'm looking for dialogue. I'm looking for civility. And so what we're going to do at the Redefining Freedom Center is we're going to have different verticals. I'm very focused on civics and reinstituting civics in our schools, in our
thank you. I'm
very concerned about mental health and well-being and how we treat one another in the public square. That CEO just being shot to death in New York City in broad daylight by a guy with a silencer. The violence that we see, the threatening, the menacing. And I want to work with Democrats and Republicans alike. We're nonpartisan, but I think that we need to come up with the things that we love about this great country of ours and that we got right. And we need to redefine and rework and reconstruct those things that we don't get right.
The name of the organization is the Redefining Freedom Center.
We're launching into January officially.
Launching in January. Look for it. Her name is Sophia Nelson. Follow her on Twitter, on X.
I am Sophia Nelson.
I am Sophia Nelson. I am Sophia Nelson. You're the best, my lady. Thank you so much for your expertise.
I love this chat, and keep doing what you do. And thank you for your comments, everybody.
God bless. Be brave, everybody. Thanks, Keith.
Bye-bye.
Remember to listen, share, and follow The Social Contract with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been The Social Contract with Joe Walsh.